listening to Seminary Dropout, and I'm your host, Shane Blackshear. Somewhere in between seminary and youth camp, it's Seminary Dropout. Let's go. My guest today is Jesse Carey, the writer for Relevant Magazine, and as most of you know him, a personality on the Relevant podcast. Jesse Carey, thanks so much for joining me on the show today.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thanks for having me.
Well, most people know you from Relevant, either the magazine or the podcast or both. How did you get started with Relevant?
So I did an internship there my senior year of college. I was a student at Oral Roberts University in fabulous Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I ended up, that was like when this was back in like 2003 or 2004. So I was working in campus radio at the school at the time, and like the campus newspaper, and we actually got like a sample copy of the magazine, which was one of the first issues. And so I was a journalism major, and ORU, from what I understand, has come a long way with their media program, but at the time it wasn't that they didn't have the best means to get experience. Our campus radio was sort of a joke, and I had a little show on there that only lasted for one brief semester before we were asked not to come back. And so, so I was looking for like actual experience, and I applied for an internship at Relevant. And for my first semester senior year, I moved down there, and basically, was just an editorial intern. And when I graduated, they offered me a job. It was kind of a different. They didn't have any openings in the editorial department, but they said, and I'm like 21 years old at this point. So this is like 10 years ago, and basically said, they enjoyed having me as an intern, and that I can take a position in at the time, book marketing, because they were publishing books at the time, which is something I knew nothing about. And they said, when a position in editorial opens up, I can move over. And so, that's sort of how I got started there.
I'm curious, what year was that? You said about 10 years ago, so 2004? 2004?
Yeah, it was about 2004, 2005.
Okay, cool. And so, I'm just trying to think. Relevant was started like in 2000, right?
It was around that time. I probably should know the company dates better, but it started off as Cameron started it as Cameron Strang. Started as like an online magazine and then moved into print. And that was a little ways before I got there. I think the first, this will be meaningless to anyone who doesn't subscribe to the magazine for a long time. But the first issue that I actually had anything in the print magazine, Mace was on the cover.
Yes, I actually remember that actual issue. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Which at the time, Mace, that was pretty cool,
Absolutely. What was your first article with Relevant?
My first thing was an album review that I got in there, and it was for an album I still really love. It was Killers' Hot Fuss. And to be fair, it was before the Killers blew up. I don't take full credit for their success, but I do take a substantial amount of it.
It's a modern classic.
Yeah, it's a good one. I like Sam's Town better, but I will take Hot Fuss.
Yeah. So
that was my first thing was. And I think the second thing was a profile on the band Explosions in the Sky, that album still holds up too.
I just love Explosions in the Sky.
Yeah, so I think those are my first two things. Yeah,
very cool. I'm curious, and I realize this. This was not your job at Relevant, but you probably have some insight since you've been there so long. We're in a day and age where, like, magazines that have been around for over a century go out of business. How in the world did Relevant manage to make it in that kind of atmosphere when the printed word was dying everywhere?
Well, I think, a lot of the credit to the success of the whole enterprise goes to Cameron, and particularly with the magazine stuff. Our ad sales guys and marketers do a really good job. But I think in terms of the overall, kind of vision that Cameron has put forth, and that the magazine's been able to kind of run with is diversifying our media platforms, because the print, just the nature of print, just putting ink on paper, there's an expense there. And so I think we have a big web presence. I write now, my primary role at this point is doing content for the website on a daily basis. So we have a big web presence. Our tablet, the iPad edition of our magazine is probably the best thing that we do. I think everyone internally would say that. We have an awesome design team. And the podcast and the different sort of avenues that we've been able to pursue have kind of helped us have a diverse presence, and I think that's really critical in the modern digital age for print magazines. I don't ever see print media dying, but I think that some of these traditional magazines that you maybe seen struggle have had a hesitancy to embrace some of those new platforms.
So going back, you mentioned that you were a journalism major, and I'm curious what you thought when you were at Oral Roberts, what you thought you were going to do with that.
Yeah.
At the time.
I didn't really have a whole lot of an idea. I worked at the school paper there, and became the editor of like the entertainment section just by default. That was what they had an opening in. So I started doing some manner of entertainment writing, but I really didn't know exactly what journalism would look like, because especially at that time, I don't know what they teach in journalism school now, but at that time, I can't imagine it's too different, but really the whole industry's changed. At that time, you were learning all about like the inverted pyramid and how to write in like AP style, which all that is good knowledge to have. But the reality is most of the stuff that you read today isn't newspaper copy. It's, has a little bit of personality to it. So we were just at the cusp of sort of how that was evolving. And I think, like I said, I didn't really have a really clear idea of what it was going to look like moving forward. But my first real experience was doing like entertainment writing. So it kind of worked out that I still do that.
Did you have an interest in journalism growing up?
Not really. I actually, I went when I first started. I actually considered this sounds random and it sounds, even when I say it now, but when I first was graduating high school, I was considering going to Bible college, and I wanted to go into ministry when I was like 17 or 18. That's what I thought I was going to do, and so I went to ORU, but I decided to do like what they call the exploratory major at the time. I don't think you can major in it. Like, it's not like a global expedition major, which would be cool. I probably would have done that if they would have offered it. But it was like, you could just knock out your general eds or whatever, the required classes. And so I kind of decided within a few months that I didn't want to do ministry. And I just I don't want to say randomly, but journalism had a lot of the interest that I liked. I was really into music. I still love music. So I figured it'd be cool to, kind of follow bands and write about movies and things like that. So that's sort of what got me into it. But I didn't really have, it wasn't like I wanted to be, Walter Cronkite or anything. I didn't really have like that kind of vision,
Yeah. You mentioned you went to Oral Roberts in Tulsa. You're from Virginia Beach, so you got Regent right there.
We do have Regent right here, but I wanted to get away, Like, I didn't really have a reason. I liked all my friends here, and I really liked my family, but I lived here my whole life and just wanted to do something different. And I didn't know anyone there. I knew nothing about there. I knew they accepted me. And so that was step one. No, but actually, I didn't really, looking back at when I was like a teenager and in high school, it's funny because I have a completely different perspective now, but I was really just kind of happy-go-lucky and just kind of did whatever. So I had no idea where I wanted to go, or I knew it would be cool just to go away, just to have that experience,
Yeah.
So I went and talked to my pastor, who's still my pastor today, and he actually went to grad school at Yale, but he went to undergrad at ORU and was like, hey, you should go check that out. So I went on a campus visit, and it was just one of the, I don't know, I don't want to say it was laziness, but it was one of those things where it's like, that's where I visited. And I was like, this feels right. Why not? I didn't visit anywhere else. So had I had the umption to visit other places, I could have ended up somewhere else. But I'm thankful for the education I received there and that I went there.
I'm just laughing mostly because my choosing of a college experience was extremely similar.
Where did you go?
I went to Howard Payne University in
Okay.
Central Texas. It's probably a lot smaller than ORU.
And where are you now?
I'm in Austin.
Where were you at the time?
So I was in a small town. My hometown is a very small town in West Texas.
Okay.
Yeah, and I went to school.
You wanted to get out of the small town. Texas.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that small town. I just moved to a different small town, and yeah, exactly. So, big changes. Yeah, but very very similar in Christian, small liberal arts Christian school. I'm curious about your home life growing up. It sounds like you probably were kind of raised going to church.
Yeah, I grew up at kind of I guess, it's weird when you travel around the country. People are like, "Oh, we're in the middle of the Bible Belt," but I feel like they say that everywhere. But this area is definitely has that kind of Bible Belt feel. The Virginia Beach and Chesapeake, the Hampton Roads area, and so I grew up at going to a church that was an evangelical church. It's still around, Beach Fellowship. My parents raised me going there, and then. Let's see. So it was somewhere around the age of like 15 or 16. Up to that point, I had like the church experience, and I started going to like a private Christian school when I was like 13. So I was getting a little bit of a Christian education, but I didn't really take it very seriously. But not to sound over spiritual or cliched, but I sort of had one of those experiences where I decided to by the grace of God, become more serious about my faith and really wanted to embrace it. So I started getting involved with the youth group at the church that I was going to, which is actually the church I still go to now. It's called, if anyone's curious, Greenbrier Church, kind of a small church here. And I got really involved in the youth group and, did the whole... you go to lock-ins and mission trips and all that jazz, and so it was, I would think where a lot of millennial evangelicals that are, have similar backgrounds, the youth group experience, the evangelical church, and I think I definitely appreciate that background, but my ideas about things have shifted a lot since then, not in a negative way, but just I think you kind of see different things from growing up in American evangelicalism that influences your faith, but then also as you get older, you can kind of see things that were maybe not so good as well. Not to say anything were wrong with those churches, but you know what I'm saying. It's just grow up in that you don't really. It takes a while to develop the faith on your own.
Yeah. Do you feel like, can you remember any, are there key moments that happened to you or events in your life that made you kind of have that kind of maturing process that you're describing?
Well, I think, okay, so I was talking about ORU, where I went to college. And at the time I was there, and this isn't, I'm not exposing anything. This is like common knowledge now. And my other thing too is I don't want to look to talk negatively about anyone. That's one of I try really hard not to do that because I feel like there's a lot of that in Christian culture that I just don't feel like it's productive. But the person who was the president of the school at the time was involved in some things that were later kind of looked at as corrupt and misusing some funds. And again, I'm not trying to say anything about his character. It's just what happened. And the school was in a really bad place. And I just started to lose some respect for the leadership there. And then I kind of became jaded about church in general, once you have sort of one negative experience with someone in leadership that in a religious capacity, I feel like it puts up this sort of cynicism, and that can be a good thing. I mean, to try to be a good judge of character for people who are in leadership. But at the time, I got really cynical, and it took me a while to realize that the church is primarily something that is, well, ultimately it's the body of Christ, but it shouldn't be something that I always have like a jaded perspective about. And I should say, since then, that school's come a long way. I mean, they have a new administration. I heard things are really great there now, and I, encourage people to, if they're interested, to check it out. But at the time, it was just one of those things where I got really jaded about the church, and it took a while for me to want any part of it again.
Yeah. It's amazing how common that story is. A story like that. It's almost a rite of passage where
really is.
We get disillusioned with church and hopefully eventually come back around to it again.
And like at the time, like I look back and I really am not happy with myself and the way I acted and maybe some things I said about, and not publicly, but just kind of being that guy that's like, oh, church is, you know how that goes. Like you're the guy who's anti-church for a while, and that's not who you want to be.
Yeah, hopefully. So, a few years ago, you had been in Orlando with Relevant, and where the headquarters are located, for a long time, and then you picked up and moved back to Virginia Beach, where you're from, and you still kind of had some connections, some roles at Relevant, but began work at CBN.
I did.
That, to me, within Christianity, seems like the most polar opposite places, again, within Christianity. But, I mean, I can just imagine, like, my picture, I've never seen Relevant headquarters, but I kind of picture like a startup atmosphere, like maybe there's a ping pong table involved. Okay,
so there's a pool table.
Okay, pool table.
So even cooler, not to
step up.
Yeah, to step up from ping pong,
because they're the startup that made it. They've been established for a while.
Yeah,
and I think of when I could just guess that CBN would probably look like a very traditional news office outlet.
Well, your assumptions are correct.
Was that kind of a jarring experience to go from one to the other and still kind of have your feet in both sides of that as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a different experience, like you said, it's a radical environment change, but again, I'm grateful for the opportunities that I've had, and but yeah, certainly the workplaces are extremely different,
Is that hard as a writer as well when you're, I was, because I read a little bit of what you've done at CBN and I read a lot of what you've done at Relevant, and you didn't get to write a lot of things for CBN that were like, 6 reasons to whatever or something like that at CBN. Is that hard to change gears or to even to be skilled in both styles of writing? Well,
I think it's even more than I think of places where I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase it for, just from the perspective of writing. One thing that I learned early on was in order to be able to write professionally, and I don't think this is beyond, just the kind of Christian market or anything like that. I think that you have to have the ability to be adaptable and not be too married to your own style. I read like a lot of submissions that people send in. And one thing that you see a lot, and it's not necessarily a negative thing, but you see a lot of people that can't break out of like first person writing, like they're writing for their own blog or something. And so I think I kind of learned the lesson early on that if you want to have the opportunity to write as your profession, you have to be willing to know that even though your name's on the byline, you're ultimately writing for someone else, and you sort of have to adapt to their style, or I don't think you should have to change to do any, that it doesn't go too far beyond stylistic changes. You don't want to change who you are or your perspective or anything like that. But I do think when it comes to the type of material that you're writing, you need the ability to have flexibility. Because I've done marketing writing too, and so when you do something for some random marketing copy, you have to be able to just kind of, like I said, change your style a bit.
Yeah. You part of your role at Relevant, you do a good amount of interviewing with people.
Yeah.
And it's not often that I get to talk to people who pretty much do the exact same thing that I do.
Yeah,
on
it's
this
weird.
podcast.
I will say this: it's weird being on the other side.
Yeah. So I'm curious. I think I just want to compare feelings that we have when we interview people.
Absolutely, let's do it.
Because
real quick, I before we do that,
yeah.
do you edit these?
Oh yeah.
Heavily.
So let me say, I edit mostly myself. Because I mean, the rate at which I say stupid things, or if I just say 7 times in a row,
sure.
The people who listen to this think I'm way smarter than I actually am.
See, and that's the main thing. The main thing about interviewing, and you could probably agree with this, is you have the power of editing, and there's nothing better than that.
Yeah.
To be able to be like, oh, dude, I totally flubbed that question, or not that you flubbed it, you've done a great job. But I think that's one curious. Whenever I listen to any other podcast, because ours is edited extremely heavily by poor Chad, who is forced to hack 2.5 hours of material down to 1 usable hour. I appreciate the role of editing in the interview process. But anyway, we can go back and forth about interviewing.
Do you still have interviews where you're starstruck, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, totally, man. I mean, I don't think you ever get over that, where, especially if it's someone that just beyond like a celebrity name, it's someone that you really have a personal interest in.
Yeah,
that's when I get. I think the main thing that I get maybe it's not even starstruck, it's nervous, is because I have an idea of what that person is like from reading their stuff or watching them or listening to their podcasts or whatever. That I'm always thinking, well, what if that's just my perception with them and they're like a total jerk, or if I just misread, or if I act like too buddy-buddy with someone I don't know. I'm always very cognizant of those things, probably to a detriment, but I think that's just that's part of the interview process.
Yeah. Is there one that sticks out in your mind that was a favorite for you, that you got to meet someone that you had really admired?
Yeah, I mean, well, I'll give you 2 very recent ones. It always changes, because the more that I've done this, the more I kind of get the interviews that I want to get. Yeah. So my favorite of all time was one that it's going to be in the upcoming issue of Relevant. I guess I can. When does this podcast come out? Just out of curiosity, when will this?
It just differs. I can hold it if you need me to hold it.
Yeah, you don't need to hold it that long. The new issue is at the printer right now. It should be coming out soon. But we have an interview in there with the guys from Radiolab, which is one of my favorite. I'm a huge NPR nerd, and I listen to all the NPR podcasts and radio. Do you listen to Radiolab at all?
Yeah, I do. I'm not. I miss some every now and then. I'm not a hardcore fan, but I do listen. I do love it.
So it's for people that may not have context. It's Jad Abumrad and Robert Krulwich, and they do a science show that blends a lot of different cultural and religious and design, all these different ideas through the filter of science. And I love their podcast. So I've heard every episode. I've listened to it for years, and I wrote a feature that's in the upcoming issue of the magazine that's about the intersections of science and faith. And I had sent a request to them to do an interview, and they agreed, and they said they would give me an hour, which, as you know, an hour is a long time to do an interview, especially if it's like a topical interview, know?
Right.
It wasn't like I wasn't looking for, to kind of do like a long form. It was going to be used as a reference point in a story. But the things that they had to say about faith in particular were so profound and so thoughtful that it really, it shouldn't have surprised me because they're both thoughtful people, but it couldn't have gone any better, even though I was like really nervous the whole time that it was just going to come to kind of one of those weird like dead spots where it's like, well, I kind of don't know what to say next. You kind of answer my next question there. Like the other thing is they were so lucid. Like you ever talk to someone and they talk with such clarity,
Yeah.
and they're so articulate that's like, man, those guys, there's no reason. There's the reason why they're in broadcasting, So that was probably one of my favorites. And then I did an interview. Well, this will be coming out down the road. I'm a big fan of The Big Lebowski and a lot of Jeff Bridges movies. And I got to talk to Jeff Bridges like a week or two ago. He was promoting The Giver, his movie that's coming out, and that was really cool. But it was different because it was like that was one where you have like the publicist on the line and you have like 15 minutes to get your questions in.
Yeah. So, do you choose or do you even get a say in the people you interview, or is that handed to you?
Right now, it's sort of a blend. I mean, I'm kind of transitioning to do a lot more web stuff. And so some of that's like very reactionary. Like I'll try to find someone to talk to about a particular issue that's happening immediately on the web. I just ran a piece this week with Jeremy Courtney, who is the guy who's the founder of the Preemptive Love Coalition. He's lived in Iraq for the last 7 years. And so we wanted to get someone's perspective about the situation that's going on there. Before that, it was Reverend Samuel Rodriguez to talk about the situation that's going on the border. So when it's web interviews, it's I'll still kind of choose or have someone on staff will make a recommendation. Hey, you should talk to so-and-so that can speak with some sort of expertise about a certain current issue. But when it comes to the magazine stuff, I pretty much get to at least request who I'm interviewing. So I did Pete Holmes a few issues ago, which was one that I've been pushing for a long time. The upcoming issue, in an upcoming issue, I was at Lollapalooza and got to talk with Shepard Fairey, a big Shepard Fairey. He's the guy who started Obey, and does a lot of cool, one of the founders of sort of the modern street art movement. So yeah, these days I can kind of have a say in who I'm interviewing.
Sometimes you'll interview somebody on the relevant podcast, but most of the time it's in print.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing, I kind of wondered if you maybe just sent the questions to them and then have them answer and send it back. But it sounds like most of the time you're on the phone with them or Skype like we're doing right now.
Yeah, exactly. Most of the time it's either a phone. Most of the time it's a phoner, but we have it rigged up now where we can take phone calls and record them on on a computer and Pro Tools and keep the audio, that if we want to use a segment to kind of tease the interview in the magazine or somewhere else, we can. But yeah, I would say 99% are phoners. I can't remember at this point doing any through email, which it would probably be easier to do them through email because you don't have to transcribe them, and people tend to talk more clearly when it's writing, but it's just the kind of nature of it is most of it's on the phone these days, or in person if we're at a junket or an event or something.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was curious because every once in a while I'll send an interview request and someone will think I'm just talking about sending them some questions and then sending some back, which would be a lot easier in some ways, like that you're talking about. It'd be a lot less time consuming. About the podcast, specifically Relevant Podcast.
Sure.
Remind me, have you been on there from the beginning?
Since episode like 4 or 5, I think.
Okay, so really early on. So my experience with the Relevant Podcast was, what year was that when that started? Do you remember?
That was around 2005, I believe.
I mean, like, podcasts were...
It's been going almost 10 years, yeah.
That's crazy. In podcast years, that's crazy.
Yeah, that's an eternity.
That's prehistoric, yeah.
I mean, podcasting was barely around, and I think that's why we had, like, good momentum at first, is because people just didn't have that many options, I mean, there was maybe 2 or 3 in, like, the Christian category, and if there even were categories,
Yeah,
this was a long time ago.
Who can remember what that looked like online?
Yeah,
then
I had the little wheel iPod,
the click wheel.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, of course. I can remember in those days because I remember getting my first iPod and checking out these new podcasts and seeing that, Relevant Magazine's got a podcast. Yeah. So listening to that and being a big fan for a long time. And then when I started this podcast, I intentionally did not listen to the Relevant podcast because, not in protest, but because I am so impressionable, and I didn't want to try to be, poor person's Relevant podcast or Relevant Light. But the podcast is extremely successful. In fact, I just came across the other day something talking about the most profitable podcasts, which I couldn't believe Relevant was one.
I saw that. I saw us on there.
That's fantastic. I mean, it's amazing. And you guys certainly have a tremendous following. What do you feel like is the reason for the success of the Relevant podcast?
Good editing. I think it's a combination of we all genuinely like each other. Anytime that you spend an hour or these days like 2 or 2.5 hours with the same group of people, which it's shifted, the lineup's kind of shifted over the years, but Cameron and I have been constants. But anytime that you're spending that amount of time with people on a weekly basis, you develop a rapport and sort of a chemistry. And I think the main thing is we try not to overthink it. There have been times where I know when I'm like creating content for it and I try to make it funny or try to make it interesting, it just doesn't work. Like there's very little, at least from my end, very little preparation goes into each episode. Like I'm talking 20 minutes before I'm looking for, we do like a news segment that we call Slices. I'm scrambling to figure out what that is, and we come to the table and have no idea what we're really going to talk about. We have a rule. Well, it's sort of an unspoken rule. We'll get on, we'll all sign on and test our levels or whatever. And we start chit-chatting just as,
like warming up.
Yeah. And, Cameron has sort of a no talking rule in that period other than once we know, look at the lines clear or whatever, we're good to go. Everyone's seated. We try not to talk because the nature of our relationships at this point is we all know what to say to make the other person laugh, and so we try to save anything usable. We try to refrain from talking about beforehand. Yeah.
You mentioned the editing, and I have to confess, just recently, I realized that during your taping, you specifically are not in the room with everyone else because you're
sitting right where we're talking.
Well, that's what I figured. I noticed you got a really professional microphone and a windscreen. It's edited so tightly, and that's a difficult thing to capture remotely. So who's in? And I realize you kind of they're not always the same people at every taping of the podcast, but who's there in Orlando? And I'm guessing they're in some kind of studio there, I'm guessing, right?
So there's a studio down the offices in Orlando where Cameron and Chad always are. And now Eddie is there too. Eddie's local. So he comes to the office, and Chad has a microphone, but if you listen, his role as producer, he does chime in, and he's a very smart, funny guy that could easily out-host most of us. But his role is producer. So Eddie and Cameron are on microphones in the studio, along with Chad, who's sort of manning the ones and twos, as Cameron likes to say. And then myself, and lately Shauna,
Nyquist,
occasionally John Acuff, Joy Egrich has been on the show recently, occasionally Tyler Huckabee, and we're all remote. So, Joy is in Portland, Shauna's in Chicago, Tyler's in Nashville. So we're all remote. And we also, I know right now we're talking a video, but when we typically, to preserve bandwidth and keep the feeds as clean as possible, we don't even use video monitors typically. So we're just feeling it out, man. just jumping in the conversation whenever we can.
That's surprising. Well, it's super funny, and you guys you really do break like all the rules of podcasting. I mean, you talk about, because people in podcasting, listeners probably don't know this unless you have a podcast yourself, but they talk about like the time frame and the average commute of the average person and stuff like that, because you're assuming these people are listening in their car on the way to work, or maybe at the gym or something like that. And so the emphasis is on 20, 30-minute podcasts. You guys will go an hour and a half easy.
Yeah, and I think it's just, again, it's one of those things where we just realize we can't overthink it, and just kind of whatever happens to an extent. If it's long, it's long. Yeah. Generally, it is longer because we don't. When we're recording, we don't have. It's not like radio or traditional broadcasting, where I think maybe early on, to a degree, we kind of thought more of it like that. That it's not like we had like a big clock in the studio, but we were more cognizant of the time. You know. But now it's like, we start recording and have no idea when we're going to end. It's not like we have like some hard end time. So we just go. Yeah. And if it works, then it'll be longer. And if stuff just kind of fell flat, it'll be shorter. But we don't really, kind of play by any sort of time rules, clearly,
So your role on the podcast, I mean, you're super funny. You interject.
Well, thank you.
You interject like just the funniest, most random things, and you've got opinions that you're super passionate about.
That's very That's
Is that safe to say? And in fact, I was asking one of my friends when I was prepping for this interview, a friend of mine who is an avid listener of the podcast, and I said, "Who do you think Jesse, like his role on the podcast, like if he were a character in a sitcom, like who would he be?"
Yeah.
And she said Chandler Bing, which first of all, I just hate the show Friends, so I don't like that, but I kind of get it.
I could see the charm there.
Sure. Sure.
Heartthrob status in the late 90s. I think we both.
Yes. But it really did make me think, like, if a lot of comedians, when you hear comedians talk or being interviewed, they'll talk about like their character of who they are on stage.
Yeah.
Or their voice on stage. And it's not that they're being a different person, but they kind of, pick up this persona. Yeah. Do you feel like you maybe kind of do that a little bit on the podcast?
I mean, I don't want to say that I'm like, that it's who I am on the podcast as a character. It may be at times an exaggerated version of myself, but
sure.
It's not like I have sort of like a script or some underlying subtext of this person I'm trying to communicate. It's really my main thing is I always want it to be fun to listen to, right? So if maybe like, let's say you and I are like having lunch together or something, and we're knocking back some Chipotle, maybe our conversations would be different to a degree on the podcast, just because, like I said, I want people to enjoy listening to it and have fun. So occasionally that may mean turning the neurosis up a bit, but the neurosis is definitely there. I'm just maybe slightly more neurotic when I know I'm recording something that people are going to listen to.
Well, Jesse, it's been really fun talking with you. I really appreciate you
absolutely,
taking the time
man. I appreciate the opportunity, and feel free to cut any of the boring stuff out at the beginning.
Nope, only my ums. If you said anything you regret, it's on you. That's staying in there.
Okay.
Thanks, Jesse. I appreciate it.
All right, man. I appreciate it.
Hey, everybody. I wanted to let you know that I'm going to be at the Faith and Culture Writers Conference this April 10th through 11th, 2015. I'm going to lead 2 breakout sessions there. It's going to be in beautiful Portland, Oregon. So I hope that you can make it. And listen, if you live in the Portland area, you got to be there. It's a no-brainer. Also, I've got something in the works that I'm pretty excited about. And it's not 100%, but I feel confident enough that it's going to happen that I'm going to go ahead and tell you. And that is at some point, probably before, during, or after the conference, I'm going to host a live episode of Seminary Dropout with the audience and everything. It'll be just like the show. I'll have a guest, maybe 2. I'll interview them. We'll have a fantastic time. The only difference is you can be there. So I really, really hope you come. And like I said, you guys in Portland, no excuses. You got to be there. April 10th through 11th. You can go to the website, and I'm talking about the conference now, not the Seminary Dropout taping, but you can go to faithandculturewriters.com and sign up there. And I would just love, love, love to meet you there. So I hope you can go, and also obviously show up for the live taping of Seminary Dropout. Thanks for joining me for another episode of Seminary Dropout. Remember, you can find all the show notes for this show and all shows at ShaneBlackshear.com. Thanks to those that left ratings and reviews on iTunes this week. Remember, that keeps the show front and center. Also, remember, you can find me on Twitter at @BeardOnABike. That's @BeardOnABike. Also, I'm on Facebook, facebook.com/ShaneBlackshear123. And remember that Seminary Dropout is listener supported. You can visit supportseminarydropout.com and press Become a Patron. Remember, this music you're listening to right now is by D.L. Rossi. You can find him online on iTunes and at dlrossi.com. All right, thanks again for joining me for another episode of Seminary Dropout. Stay tuned for next week's episode. Love you. Take care.
Grace that I've received, and though you've loved your enemy, and you turn